Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters Plus here on France 24, our program that features special reports from our correspondents worldwide. In this edition, one man's defiance of one of the deadliest terror groups in the world. Since 2011, the Islamist insurgents of Boko Haram stepped up their attacks, targeting religious, political groups, local police and military, as well as indiscriminately attacking civilians in places such as busy markets and their own villages, killing almost 40,000 people in the process. Well, nowadays, Nigeria has proclaimed the defeat of the group, but in the far northeast of the country, the Boko Haram threat is effectively still ever present, and one man is risking his life to provide something for local children that Boko Haram would kill to stop. That something is education. In Maiduguri, our reporters met a man who's dedicating his life to helping local children get just that, and the families too who are taking a risk in sending their kids to school. Our reporters, Catherine Norris-Trent and Jonathan Walsh, went to Maiduguri to meet Zana Mustafa, a lawyer with a huge and brave sense of justice.
You have to study your books. You need to be serious. You have to come to school early. You have to be neat.
A school to rebuild young lives in northeastern Nigeria. The dream of retired barrister Zana Mustafa. Since he started out, this project has spiralled in a region ravaged by conflict.
It all started in 2007. I started with 36 orphans. Then there was this insurgency of Boko Haram. It started in that year, and there were a lot of children cast on the street who cannot access education. And their parents were killed, and nobody identified with them.
More than 800 children are now enrolled, nearly all orphans. It's an Islamic school, but they also study English. Exactly the kind of Western education forbidden and targeted by Boko Haram. And crucially, the children here are learning to overcome psychological scars.
When I get together with my friends, I forget everything that they did to me. It's when I get home and I see things there, and then I remember.
Hawa's life was turned upside down in 2014 when jihadists raided her village.
My father was about to leave for the mosque when he saw some people, and he warned us not to come outside because there were men from Boko Haram there. And then when he left to pray, they caught him and brought him home, and then they killed him. They slit his throat in front of us. He was just standing there and they cut his throat.
The shock sent Hawa's pregnant mother into early labour, and she died. The rest of the family fled and scattered.
I just want to see my younger brothers again. My little brothers are back there. They're living with a lady now. We all ran away together at first, but they returned to the village.
Like Hawa, many children here are still deeply traumatized. The school's solution is reconciliation. In the same classrooms, victims of the jihadists, like Hawa, sit alongside children of killed Boko Haram fighters. The school keeps their identities confidential. But Zana Mustafa believes cohabitation is essential.
The insurgency do have their own children in this school. You know, as children, they don't see anything bad in other children. It is only we, as adults, keep grudges. If we cannot settle amicably the conflict we are in now, these children will be the likely ones to settle for amicable settlement of peace in this country.
Zana Mustafa has won a UN award and financing for his school in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, and the birthplace of Boko Haram. The jihadist group's moniker loosely translates as Western education is sinful. Notorious for brutal attacks, the militants captured swathes of territory in northeastern Nigeria and, under the leadership of Abu Bakr Shekau, declared a caliphate in 2014. The UN estimates the conflict has cost 20,000 lives in Borno State alone. Nigerian troops have pushed back the militants in recent years. This summer, they celebrated National Army Day in the country's far north, near Lake Chad. The head of the armed forces telling us the jihadists have all but been defeated.
On the ground, the ability of the Boko Haram to fight, to take territories, and then establish a strong foothold in those areas is no more. So on the ground, our troops have achieved that objective. The ground war has been won.
But Boko Haram are far from wiped out. We're on patrol with the Nigerian army on the edge of the Sambisa forest. For years, the base camp of Boko Haram. Groups of fighters are still at large in the vegetation here. The troops fire to try and flush them out.
If there's any Boko Haram terrorist there, he will respond. He will definitely respond, and we'll go after him. It has worked in the past for us.
One of Boko Haram's main ways to target the army now is to lay roadside bombs.
This is an abandoned village, so insurgents usually come out here to see what they can scavenge. These are one of their crossing points. So they usually come to plant IEDs on the road or along these areas where we lay ambush for them.
We're on one of the main access roads leading to Maiduguri. Working with the army are vigilantes from the Civilian Joint Task Force, or CJTF, men who volunteered to resist Boko Haram, often unarmed or carrying only rudimentary weapons. Their strength lies in local knowledge, recognizing who is who.
They have offered to carry out the search of the vehicles because they are indigents of the community. They know those that are not members of Boko Haram.
Often these checks are not enough. In 2018, Borno State has been blighted by coordinated suicide attacks, targeting markets, mosques, checkpoints. Boko Haram force their captives, often women and girls, to carry out bombings. It's become the major threat in this zone. And so CJTF vigilantes patrol villages here on the outskirts of Maiduguri to try and weed out any intruders.
They asked us if we saw any suspects, but we haven't. There was a suicide attack here and shooting. We're so afraid.
There must be some here. They're hidden, living in the local communities. And there are people here who know, but they won't reveal who is a member of Boko Haram.
There are an estimated 30,000 CJTF members in northeastern Nigeria, a valuable intelligence network. Jidda has come to relay information about Boko Haram activity in his zone.
They bring in bombs after nightfall. At the moment, they're at the edge of the village and they shoot at people.
Jidda's wife, Falmata, has a remarkable story. She was seized by Boko Haram in 2014 and separated from her 2 children. In captivity, the jihadists ordered her to put on an explosive belt to become a suicide bomber.
They told us, come, we're going to put bombs on you. It won't hurt you, just kill the other people. They placed the bombs on 2 other women and they wanted to put one on me too. They called me over. They told me to go and braid my hair and decorate my hands with henna. They wanted us to look presentable. And when I saw that, I said I needed the toilet. There was a place just behind the house. I went out there and just ran into the forest. I don't know if the other women are alive or not. I just don't know.
After fleeing through the night, Falmata handed herself in to the CJTF. She was detained, screened for security. Jidda was won over by her strength of character.
With time, she became the leader of the detainees when they were allowed out. She was in charge because she was clever. I went there to work. That's where we met, and I fell for her.
Now, Falmata works with her husband, identifying Boko Haram members.
She helps us. We use her when new people come here. She helps us with intelligence. She points them out, identifying those that were working with Boko Haram. She recognizes those who are with them.
Once they're here arrested in front of us, they have no power over me.
Stories of resistance and strength. Northeast Nigeria is full of them. On a Sunday morning, we meet up with Hawa again, the schoolgirl whose father was killed by Boko Haram. She now lives with her aunt and uncle, who are helping her to recuperate.
I'm here with my family now. They do things for me that I like during Eid. They make me new clothes, 2 or 3 new outfits.
Hawa is Muslim, her aunt and uncle Christians.
I'm looking after Awa on behalf of her parents and I don't want to betray them. I had to take her in. Everyone chooses their own path in life and God alone knows who's right.
My mother died a Muslim. My father died a Muslim. That's why I follow their religion. My younger siblings will one day too.
Hawa's aunt, Panna, heads off to Mass. Religiously mixed communities aren't unusual in this region. Intercommunal violence has flared in past decades, but Boko Haram ruthlessly targeted the Christian minority. These days, worshippers in Maiduguri are back in church, albeit under tight security.
Back then, you couldn't come to this church. They'd attack and set churches on fire. Many Christians had their throats cut or were burnt alive. Even now, there are still killings out in the villages.
Panna and her family are from the region of Chibok, the village notorious for the kidnapping of hundreds of schoolgirls. Her niece, Hawa's cousin, is still among those seized.
Even now, we don't have any news of her. Is she alive or not? We don't know. And even when they freed a group of the girls, we didn't know if she was among them. But in the end, she wasn't. We pray for her morning and night. I even ask Hawa to pray for her too. I hope God hears our prayers. Hawa's or mine.
Mass kidnappings have sown terror in the hearts of the population, but none made as wide an impact as Chibok. In 2014, 276 mostly Christian schoolgirls were abducted by Boko Haram. Many were shown later in jihadist videos, forced to convert. Since then, more than 100 have been freed, after lengthy negotiations led by the founder of the School for Orphans, Zana Mustafa. He was in regular dialogue with Boko Haram as a mediator.
What I do is just to tell them, what are you going to do with the girls now that you are holding them? Would you want to waste your food, which you don't even have here? Or is it that you want to keep them? They are not practicing your religion. So what are you doing with them? So these are some of the narrative you have to change to tell them.
Zana Mustafa's power of persuasion stems not only from his standing as a lawyer and education activist, but his acquaintance with the founder of Boko Haram, Muhammad Yusuf, a radical Islamic preacher who built up a large following in impoverished northern Nigeria from 2002. Yusuf's sect became extremist and turned to violence.
I know him very well. He knows me very well. Yeah.
How did you know each other?
Well, we pray in the same mosque. And this mosque is just very close to this place. Yeah.
In 2009, Muhammad Yusuf was arrested and killed while in custody. And his successors in Boko Haram launched all-out conflict.
This place used to be a no-go area for many people. And the insurgent states in the outskirts of the city was the period when most of those elite deserted the area.
The militants driven out of town by the army, Maiduguri has regained much of its calm. Zana Mustafa has spent his whole life in the city and witnessed the most violent years of the conflict. Like many devout Muslims here, he deplores Boko Haram's deadly tactics.
You know, there is nothing in this life that God has placed sacred or kept it sacred as the human life. You know, even the religion of Islam takes it that it is better to put down the house of God in Mecca than to kill a human soul.
A major issue for society here is what to do with Boko Haram fighters once they've laid down their weapons. De-radicalization programs have been launched. We meet one former fighter freed after 2 years in such a center. He now lives in one of the many camps for displaced people. He accepts to tell his story on condition we conceal his identity.
In the camp, nobody likes me. They all know who I am.
Someone told me, even if there is peace, I will kill you one day, because you slaughtered so many people.
He tells us he was forced to enroll on pain of death when Boko Haram attacked his village, and chillingly describes how he committed atrocities.
I can't even say how many throats I cut. When we found a group of women, we'd get one of them to slit all the others' throats. The men, we'd kill them. When we attacked a village, we'd surround it and place our fighters to watch out for the army. We'd park our vehicles around the outside, and we'd set everything on fire.
He shows no sign of regret, and even laughs when asked if he thinks the jihadist group will be eradicated soon.
This will never end. There are so many of them still in the forest.
It's impossible to verify how many Boko Haram fighters are still out there. The movement has fractured into two rival branches, at large near Lake Chad, and in the regions bordering Niger, Chad and Cameroon. We take a UN helicopter out to the frontier with Cameroon. Many rural areas are still vulnerable, with towns and villages tightly guarded enclaves. The town of Pulka is now controlled by the army, retaken from Boko Haram. When the jihadists seized Pulka in 2014, they started by ransacking the school. Since the conflict began, nearly 2,300 teachers have been murdered.
This used to be a classroom where the children were taught. But when Boko Haram arrived, they destroyed it. This was the first room they demolished.
So 2 into 3 is 3, then 6 into 6, then 1 times 1.
They didn't want us to teach or to have a Western school at all. They only allowed us to give Quranic lessons, that's all. So that's why whenever they came across teachers, they'd kill them.
Boko Haram still operate in this zone. At the start of September, they killed 2 people and kidnapped a busload of passengers.
They're only around 5 to 7 kilometers from us here. If you go past where the soldiers are stationed, well, if you're not lucky, you won't come back. It does make us afraid. Since Boko Haram came here, I've counted the attacks one by one, and there have been 12 of them.
Amid the ongoing fear and violence, vast numbers of people are still fleeing their homes. According to the UN, there are nearly 2 million internally displaced people. And the camps are growing, overflowing with people desperate for shelter, food and water. They're continuing to pour into enclaves like Pulka.
The humanitarian crisis is there. It's not finishing. People are still in need of humanitarian assistance. They arrive from liberated villages. Whenever there's a military operation, people do come out in mass. On a weekly basis, we record influx of 500 or over. Whenever there's a military operation, it might be more than this into Pulka.
Nigerian authorities are encouraging people to return home, evoking post-conflict stabilization. But Celia fled her village 4 years ago and still can't go back, even though it's less than a kilometre outside the camp's perimeter.
The army hasn't reached our place yet. There's no security there. That's why we're here. And our houses are still in ruins.
Back in Maiduguri, we have a last meeting with Zana Mustafa, the school founder and Chibok negotiator. He's overseeing a new project, another school for displaced children.
They are going to put up a fence to barricade between the farmland and then the school. How are you? Well done. Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's good.
The parents of the pupils will be given a patch of land to farm on site to feed their families.
The idea behind the whole thing is how to assist those less privileged, those people that are displaced. You cannot just send a child to school without necessarily having a home, a sustainable means.
The former barrister provided all the land for this project, but Nigerian authorities have financed and built the school. Zana Mustafa hopes through cooperation like this, long-standing distrust and hurt can start being assuaged.
Successive governments have not done enough. There was a huge corruption in the system. We are trying to bridge the gap between the government and the people. I have seen some of the most heinous crimes being committed here. But now you can now see there is a change in the paradigm. So in very near future, I'm very optimistic that peace will return to Maiduguri and the Northeast in general.
A much-needed vision of hope in this region still plagued by conflict. So many more schools will have to be built, with countless lives thrown into chaos. It's 9 years since Boko Haram launched its campaign of terror, and lasting calm is still far on the horizon.
And that's the fight back against Boko Haram, our Reporters Plus special film by Catherine Norris-Trent and Jonathan Walsh. You can, of course, see it again by our website, france24.com. This is Reporters Plus. Stay with us.